Hi there, I'm Shannon. I thought helping my sister through tough times would bring us closer. But after 3 years of paying her debts, I was the one pushed out like a stranger. It wasn't just about losing a home, it was about losing the people I thought would always stand beside me. What would you do if the ones you loved most treated you like a burden? Let's dive in. The first cracks, when loyalty meets betrayal. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, tossing the last stack of dishes into the drying rack before grabbing my work uniform from the back of the chair. Another day, another shift. Working 2 jobs wasn't glamorous, but it was necessary. Saving for the future wasn't a dream in my world, it was survival. And when Amber lost her job, sharing my old car had seemed like a small price to pay for family loyalty. The car sat proudly in the driveway, a secondhand silver Honda that still coughed a little when you turned the key. I paid for it with overtime shifts and weekends sacrificed at the diner. When Amber moved back home, she begged to borrow it, just until she could get back on her feet. I agreed without hesitation. That's what sisters did. Weeks later, while stepping outside to grab the mail, I saw it. The name Amber carefully spelled out in pink glitter letters stuck across the rear windshield. Neighbors waved at her, complimenting her new ride. Amber laughed, tossing her hair like a teenager showing off a first car. She never once corrected them. I stood on the sidewalk, mail clutched against my chest, watching her drive off with a sense of pride that was supposed to be mine. "It's just a car," I muttered under my breath. "Right?" The first ding on the bumper came a few days later. "Must have been a bad parking job," Amber said, wrinkling her nose. "You were driving it," I reminded her carefully. She shrugged. "Maybe if you kept up with the maintenance, this wouldn't happen." Honestly, Shan, you're so careless sometimes. Later that night, I found Darlene in the kitchen stirring a pot of soup. "Amber said the bumper's your fault," she said without looking at me. "Maybe you should fix it, sweetie. No need to stir up drama over a few dents." Drama. That word stuck like a thorn under my skin. Drama for expecting basic respect. Drama for asking not to be treated like a backup plan. When had love started keeping score? I started locking my bedroom door at night, not because I feared them, but because I needed some kind of boundary they couldn't cross without knocking. I hid my insurance papers in an old shoebox under the bed. I started paying cash for groceries, so there wouldn't be any bank statements lying around. The house felt smaller now. Walls I used to find comfort in suddenly pressed in too tight. Amber's laughter echoed through the hallway, a constant reminder that somewhere along the line, the rules of belonging had changed, and I was the outsider now. One evening, I watched through the window as Amber tossed the keys in the air, catching them with a smug grin before jumping into her car. She didn't even glance back toward the house where I stood. Maybe things weren't as simple as they used to be. The invisible birthday, a celebration forgotten. The house smelled faintly of dust and last night's leftover dinner as I walked into the kitchen that morning. The calendar on the wall, a cheap one from the gas station, mocked me silently. June 14th, my birthday. I didn't expect a party. Balloons, streamers, and candles were for other people. People whose families remembered simple things like dates and milestones. I only hoped for a small gesture, a hug maybe, a cup of coffee placed quietly by my seat. Just something. Amber breezed past me in the hallway, purse slung over her shoulder, car keys jingling between her fingers. "Running errands," she tossed over her shoulder. "Be back late." Darlene stood by the sink, scrubbing a plate that had been clean for 10 minutes already. "Don't wait up for dinner," she muttered, without looking at me. I nodded, feeling the quietest kind of ache settle in my chest. The sun moved across the sky. Morning became afternoon, then slipped into evening without ceremony. No text messages, no birthday calls, not even a nod. Around 8, I drove myself to the little corner bakery down the block. It smelled of yeast and sugar and memories that didn't belong to me. I picked out a single chocolate cupcake, heavy with icing, tucked it carefully into a paper bag. At home, I lit a lone candle in the kitchen. Its tiny flame wavered as if embarrassed to stand alone. I sang softly under my breath, a whisper of a happy birthday to myself, then made a wish I didn't really believe would come true. In the living room, Amber and Darlene sat on opposite ends of the couch, lost in reruns of a reality show neither of them really liked but watched anyway. Laughter, canned and hollow, drifted through the thin walls. None of it was meant for me. I sat at the kitchen table, picking crumbs off the cupcake wrapper long after the cupcake itself was gone, staring at nothing in particular. It wasn't anger I felt. It was smaller than that. It was absence. Days later, while cleaning the house, I noticed something missing from my dresser. A small bracelet, nothing extravagant, something I had bought myself weeks before as a quiet promise. You are worth celebrating. Gone. Amber caught my glance sweeping over the empty spot. "Oh, that?" she said, flipping her hair like a teenager. "Sold it. Needed quick cash." I stared at her, mouth slightly open, waiting for the punchline that never came. "You sold my birthday gift?" I finally managed to say, voice barely above a whisper. She shrugged. "It was just lying around. You didn't seem to care." I closed my eyes briefly, tasting the metallic tang of betrayal at the back of my throat. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't sound pathetic. That night I sat in my room, staring at the bare space where the bracelet used to gleam under the soft light of my desk lamp. The empty spot seemed bigger than the whole room, bigger than the house. Maybe they just forgot. Maybe. I whispered into the silence, even though a deeper part of me already knew forgetting had nothing to do with it. The silent betrayal, when words cut deeper than actions. The chill of fall crept under the doors and windows, curling into the corners of the house where laughter used to live. I pulled my sweater tighter around me as I replayed the conversation from a few weeks ago. Amber had asked me for help again, a significant amount this time. She promised it was temporary, just enough to clear some overdue bills until she could catch her breath. Believing in family, I gave without hesitation, tapping into my savings without a second thought. After all, wasn't that what sisters were for? But days turned into weeks, and the casual jokes started. "You know, keeping track of money between family is just weird," Amber said one night, laughing as if the idea itself was offensive. "Yeah," Travis chimed in from the living room. "It's not like she's hurting for it anyway." I didn't answer. I just smiled thinly, feeling the quiet stab settle deep somewhere behind my ribs. It was a chilly Saturday afternoon when it happened. I was cleaning the kitchen when Amber's phone buzzed, abandoned on the counter. I glanced over, meaning to ignore it, until a preview of the message caught my eye. A group chat. Amber, Travis, Darlene. My heart tapped an uneven rhythm as I picked up the phone. The screen was still unlocked. Just a quick glance, I told myself. A breath. "Drama queen," one message read, followed by a laughing emoji. "Think she's better because she has a car and an apartment," another chimed in. "Poor Shannon, always so serious," Darlene had typed. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes, but I couldn't stop reading. Every line chipped away at the fragile defenses I'd built after the birthday they forgot. I wasn't a sister. I wasn't a daughter. I was a joke, a walking wallet, a burden. I dropped the phone back onto the counter, the clatter louder than I intended. From the living room, someone laughed, a hollow, careless sound that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with the world they had built without me. That night, I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket too thin for the weather, watching the sky bleed into dark purple. The laughter inside grew softer, more muffled, as if it belonged to strangers miles away. A stray cat wandered into the yard, skinny and cautious. It looked at me for a long moment before slinking into the bushes, disappearing without a sound. I wondered if it knew something I didn't, how to leave without looking back. At some point, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the date of my next birthday, June 14th, a blinking reminder I had set years ago. I pressed delete without hesitation. Maybe silence speaks louder than promises. Public humiliation, when family turns into spectators. The scent of roasted turkey and sweet potatoes filled the air, curling through the rooms like a promise I desperately wanted to believe. I smoothed my hair down in the mirror before stepping out of my bedroom, forcing a smile onto my face. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be about family. The dining table was stretched to its limit, chairs borrowed from neighbors to accommodate the extra bodies. Laughter bubbled up from the living room where cousins and aunts chattered, their voices weaving a background hum of false warmth. I stayed busy, setting plates, refilling drinks, arranging silverware that no one would notice but that somehow felt important, a way to matter, even if only in the margins. As we sat down to eat, Darlene raised her glass. "Let's toast to Amber," she said, her voice bright and clear. "She's the real rock of this family, always so dependable, always thinking ahead." The words slid across the table like a slap. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth, waiting for even the smallest mention of my name. A nod, a glance, anything. Nothing came. The conversation picked up again. The clinking of glasses, the low rumble of approval. Amber beamed, soaking it all in, while I folded myself smaller into my chair. Later, after the plates were cleared and the wine had loosened tongues, an uncle chuckled. "Shannon, when are you gonna catch up with your sister, huh? Seems like she's got everything figured out?" The room laughed, some awkwardly, others too loudly. Darlene didn't miss a beat. "If only she had half of Amber's ambition," she quipped, winking toward Amber. Laughter exploded around me like gunfire. I stared down at my empty plate, heat flooding my face, my hands trembling in my lap. I wanted to disappear into the floorboards, to melt into the background they had so carefully assigned me. I excused myself with a tight smile and made my way to the bathroom. Locking the door behind me, I leaned heavily against the sink. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed faintly, the only witness to the storm cracking open inside me. I stared into the mirror, searching for the girl I used to be, the one who believed that love was unconditional, that loyalty meant something. The girl who had once dreamed of building something lasting, something safe, with these people. But she wasn't there. Only the reflection of a woman who had given everything and received silence in return. When the night wound down and the last goodbyes echoed through the house, I slipped out the front door alone. The cold air bit into my skin, but it felt cleaner out here, more honest. As I pulled my coat tighter around me and walked down the driveway, I looked back one last time. The windows glowed warm with laughter and light, but none of it was meant for me. Maybe blood ties are just ropes. The ultimate betrayal, a signature that changed everything. The gray clouds pressed low against the city that afternoon, a heavy curtain over Austin. Inside the house, the air felt even heavier. Conversations halted when I walked into a room. Amber and Darlene huddled over papers at the kitchen table, their voices dipping to whispers the moment they sensed me nearby. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself families had secrets sometimes, harmless ones. But a tight knot settled in my stomach and refused to loosen. Later that evening, as the others laughed softly over a television show I wasn't invited to join, I wandered into the small office tucked away at the back of the house. It smelled like dust and forgotten promises. A folder sat half-tucked into the corner of the desk. Curious and cautious, I slid it out and opened it. The first page hit me like a slap, a deed adjustment form, new signatures. Darlene's shaky handwriting scrawled across the lines. The house, everything I had worked for, paid for, kept standing through broken pipes and overdue taxes, was now officially transferred under Darlene's sole name. No mention of me, no acknowledgement of my sacrifices. Buried deep in the fine print was a clause. Darlene had full rights to sell without notifying any other party. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the rest of the papers. It wasn't sloppy. It wasn't rushed. It was planned. Neat, deliberate betrayals tucked neatly into legal jargon. I recognized Travis's influence immediately. The slickness, the manipulation hidden behind friendly smiles. It wasn't just Amber. It wasn't just Darlene. They had all played their parts. I sat down heavily in the old wooden chair, the weight of betrayal pressing down harder than the December chill leaking through the window frame. Images flashed in my mind. Cold winters spent patching leaks in the roof, spring days spent repainting cracked walls, summer weekends sacrificed to overtime shifts to cover property taxes no one else could pay. All for this. All for a signature. Alone in my room that night, I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the universe tilt and shift beneath me. The house, once a symbol of hope and endurance, had become a weapon, turned against me by the very people it was meant to protect. I thought about confronting them, about demanding explanations they wouldn't give. But something colder, something stronger, settled in my bones instead. I returned the documents carefully, precisely as I had found them. Let them believe I knew nothing, for now. Standing in the darkness of my room, I whispered to the silent air, "If they want a war, they've just declared it." The turning point: betrayal meets defiance. The air inside the house had thickened, heavy with tension that clung to the walls like invisible smoke. I moved carefully through it, sensing the way conversations shrank into silence whenever I entered a room. Amber's eyes darted to Travis's. Darlene kept herself busy rearranging things that didn't need rearranging. I had become the unwelcome ghost in my own home. One evening, tucked behind the half-closed kitchen door, I overheard Travis's voice carrying from the porch. He spoke too loudly, confidence dripping from every word. "Once she's gone," he laughed, "it'll be easy. Flip the house, split the money, start fresh somewhere warm." There was no mention of Darlene, no promises to take care of her, no gratitude for everything Shannon, me, had kept alive. Just a new beginning funded by betrayal. The words hit me harder than I expected. Even after everything, some small, stubborn part of me had believed I mattered, not as a wallet, not as an obstacle, but as family. I backed away before they could see me, retreating to my room on legs that barely felt steady. I closed the door quietly and sat on the edge of my bed, hands trembling in my lap. Flashbacks crowded my mind, scraping paint off peeling walls in the Texas heat, skipping vacations to pay overdue taxes, counting out crumpled bills at the hardware store, promising myself it would be worth it. It wasn't just money they had stolen, it was years. It was trust. It was the simple belief that home meant safety. But as the evening deepened and the shadows stretched long across my room, something inside me shifted. No more tears, no more excuses. A different kind of clarity filled the hollow spaces betrayal had left behind. A cold, steady resolve. I opened my laptop and began gathering every document I had ever signed. I photographed the house, the repairs I had paid for, the improvements no one else had bothered with. I searched legal advice forums late into the night, piecing together a plan in the quiet desperation only betrayal can fuel. There was no grand cinematic moment, no breaking plates or shouted confrontations. There was just me, sitting in the dim glow of my desk lamp, laying out the pieces of a different kind of war. One built on facts, one they wouldn't see coming. That night, lying awake in the stillness, I whispered into the darkness, "If they think I'm weak, they'll soon find out how wrong they are." The unveiling, lies, deceit, and a plan to fight back. The summer heat pressed against the windows, thick and suffocating, as I sat at the small desk tucked into the corner of my room. Piles of papers surrounded me, old utility bills, insurance policies, mortgage documents. My heart hammered a nervous rhythm against my ribs. Something wasn't right. It hadn't been for a long time. I flipped through the folders, my fingers trembling slightly. Hidden between outdated bank statements and property tax receipts, I found it. A stack of legal-looking papers, crisp and clean, far too new for anything that should have belonged here. I pulled them out carefully, scanning the pages. Forged consent forms, signatures that looked eerily like mine, but not quite. Backdated agreements transferring ownership without my knowledge. Each line felt like another stone laid on the grave of the family I thought I had. My breath caught painfully in my throat. For a moment, the room spun, and I had to close my eyes to keep from falling apart right there among the ruins. But instead of tears, a slow, burning anger ignited deep within me. I would not crumble for them. Not again. The next morning, with the documents tucked securely into a battered manila folder, I made my way downtown. The diner sat tucked between an abandoned bookstore and a tailor shop that still had Christmas lights in its window, even though it was June. It was the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and old dreams. Alex was already there, a familiar face in a sea of strangers. We hadn't seen each other since college, but his smile was just as steady, just as kind. He slid into the booth across from me, raising an eyebrow as I pushed the folder toward him with shaking hands. "Long story," I whispered. He didn't ask questions, just opened the folder and started reading. The longer he read, the darker his expression grew. His fingers tightened around the edge of the paper until his knuckles turned white. When he finally looked up, his voice was low and even. "They committed serious fraud, Shannon. You have every right and every legal ground to fight back, and you should." For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a breath of real air fill my lungs. Not vengeance, not rage, just a simple, quiet certainty that I was no longer trapped. We talked logistics over cold coffee, mapping out the first steps of the battle ahead. It wasn't just about getting back what they tried to steal. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself they had chipped away at piece by piece. That night, I sat alone in my car outside the diner, the neon signs blurring into streaks of color through the tears I refused to let fall. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't waiting for them to choose me. I was choosing myself. I leaned back against the seat, feeling the hum of the city around me, the pulse of possibility rising in my chest. It's my turn now. The final goodbye, severing ties, saving myself. The walls of the house no longer felt like walls. They felt like the inside of a cage. Every familiar creak in the floorboards, every crack in the ceiling I once thought gave the house character, now seemed like fractures in something irreparably broken. I moved silently through the rooms, my duffel bag growing heavier with each item I packed. My shoes, my books, my old journals, all the pieces of me they had never noticed, or maybe had chosen to ignore. Laughter floated from the living room, Amber's sharp giggle, Travis's low grunt of amusement, Darlene's tired but willing chuckle. None of it included me. It was like I had already disappeared, a ghost haunting a home where I was no longer welcome. No one asked where I was going. No one asked if I needed help. No one cared. I zipped the last bag shut and stood in the doorway of my room, looking around one final time. This small, battered space had once been my refuge. Now it was just a hollow shell, emptied out like a room after a party no one remembered throwing. At the front door, I paused. I could have just left, slipped away like a breath no one noticed leaving. But something inside me, a fragile but stubborn piece, refused to let them erase me so easily. I turned toward the living room. Amber noticed me first, her smile faltering into something cold and suspicious. Travis looked up briefly before going back to whatever game he was playing on his phone. Darlene's eyes flickered to me and away again, guilty but unwilling to act. In a voice that didn't shake, I said, "Thank you for showing me who you truly are. I won't be coming back." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Amber smirked, a small, brittle thing. Darlene opened her mouth, maybe to protest, but no words came out. Travis didn't even look up. I stepped outside, the door clicking shut behind me with the soft finality of a page turning. The night air wrapped around me, sharp and alive. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight I had carried for years start to lift, inch by inch. The street was quiet, no porch lights on except mine. I loaded my bags into the back seat of the car that had once been the spark of resentment between us and slipped behind the wheel. As I pulled away, the house grew smaller in my rearview mirror, its windows glowing warm and empty. I whispered to myself, "I'm not running away. I'm finally walking toward myself." The resolution, moving beyond the past. The morning air wrapped around me like a soft blanket as I sat on the narrow balcony of my new apartment. A chipped ceramic mug warmed my hands, steam curling up into the cool sky. From where I sat, the skyline of Austin looked quieter, smaller somehow, as if it no longer held the same weight over me. This little apartment wasn't much. A cracked tile in the kitchen, a stubborn window that wouldn't close all the way. But it was mine. Every square inch had been earned, fought for, not handed down, not bargained over, not stolen. I sipped the coffee slowly, letting the silence seep into my bones. It had taken months to get here. Not just the move, not just the paperwork, but the journey through anger, sadness, betrayal, and the long, aching silence that came after. I thought about the years I had given away so freely, the holidays spent picking up double shifts so I could keep the house afloat, the birthdays forgotten, the smiles forced through gritted teeth, the endless, invisible sacrifices. They never loved me for me, only for what I could offer, what I could fix, what I could carry. The realization no longer cut like it once had. It simply existed now, like an old scar across skin that had learned how to heal without closing perfectly. Word trickled back to me through old neighbors, mutual acquaintances who hadn't picked sides but couldn't resist sharing news. Amber and Travis had sold the house, for far less than it was worth. The money, they said, vanished quickly, eaten by bad investments, reckless decisions, whispered fights behind closed doors. Darlene now lived in a cramped assisted living facility on the other side of town. No one visited much, maybe because no one could stand the reflection they found there. I didn't feel triumphant. There was no satisfaction in their unraveling, only a heavy, tired kind of sadness, the kind that settles into your chest and makes you wonder if anything ever really could have been different. I didn't reach out. I didn't gloat. I didn't offer forgiveness or seek revenge. Instead, I bought a few pots and filled them with soil. Tiny green shoots sprouted on the balcony: basil, lavender, marigolds. I watched them grow, their roots digging into the new earth, stubborn and sure. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't something I owed to them. It was something I owed to myself. One evening, I pulled out an old leather-bound journal from a box I hadn't opened since the move. I flipped past the blank pages, picked up a pen and started writing. Not about them, not about what I had lost, but about what I still had left to build. I closed the journal softly and leaned back in the chair, the city humming quietly beneath me. Some wounds don't heal, but they stop bleeding. I smiled faintly at the rising sun, feeling the first true warmth I had known in years. This was only the end of one story. Another was just beginning, somewhere within me. Looking back, I realized that losing the place I once called home was never really a loss. It was a liberation. Sometimes, walking away from what hurts you is the bravest form of love you can give yourself. You don't owe loyalty to people who confuse sacrifice with servitude. You don't have to carry the weight of their expectations forever. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to remember without reopening the wound. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from a place or people you once thought you couldn't live without? I'd love to hear your story. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Whether it's a simple 1 inch if this video touched your heart, or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with this story, I'm still curious. What didn't work for you? If this video resonated with you and you believe in second chances, fresh starts, and the power of healing, please hit that subscribe button. I'd love for you to be part of this growing community. Your story matters here. See you in the next one.